Hi, everyone. I want to talk to you about journeying between Genesis and Revelation. You know, every so often when people discover that I'm a pastor, and that's been my vocation for the past 20 years, you know, the one question that they want a short answer to is, so what is the Bible all about? What's it all about? And while I don't believe that there is a short answer to that question, I do believe that there is a short way of finding an answer, and that's found in the first and the last books of the Bible, Genesis and Revelation. Go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and it begins before time as we know it. It says, in the beginning, God. That's what the English says. The Hebrew says, in beginning. The inference being, whenever there's a beginning being begun, God is the one who's doing it. But go to the end of chapter 1, and what you find is God and humanity. God and humanity at the end of chapter 1 of Genesis 1. Go all the way now to Revelation 22. And it starts, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. It actually starts after time as we know it. And once again, right at the end of that book, you see God and humanity. And read between Genesis 1 and Revelation 22, and you will see that it is the unending, continued story of God and us. And essentially, that's what the Bible is about. The Bible is about God and us. In a nutshell, that's what it's about. And look at it, and you will see it's no fairy story. Although the Bible has been sometimes accused of telling fairy tales, it's no fairy story. It's not a pretty story. It's a messy story. It's a complicated story. It's a violent story. It's a confrontational story. In so many places, it's a dysfunctional story. Why? Because it's a story of us. It is literally the story of who we are as human beings. But look, and you will see that there is a beauty in it. There's a beauty in the ugly picture. And this is the beauty in the ugly picture. It doesn't lie. And that's the thing I love the most about the Bible. It doesn't lie about who we are. It doesn't paint a picture that we can't recognize. We instantly recognize ourselves in these stories. And I think that's why some people find the Bible uncomfortable to read. Because they think, oh my gosh, yeah, that's me. Oh my gosh, that's that situation. Oh my gosh, that's those people over there. Oh my gosh, this is where I find myself now. The Bible is a holy book that tells the unholy truth about who we are as human beings. But there is another beautiful image that remains consistent in that. There is another beautiful thread that weaves itself through the tapestry of the human story, and it is this: the presence of God. From Genesis 1 to Revelation 22, at no time does God divorce himself from the human story. At no time does he divorce himself from who we are. At our highest points and at our lowest points, God is in the center of the human journey, journeying our Genesis to Revelation with us. As restless and as drifting as we become, he is consistently found in the midst of our restlessness and our wandering. And that is the real beauty spot. The other beauty spot is not just this honesty about our dysfunction, but what happens when the reality of God connects with and runs into the reality of who we are, the reality of his presence. When we are confronted with that, it's the beautiful story of how God is able to transform our stories and transform our narratives when we connect with him. It is beautiful. God continues to just remain woven into the human story and into the human's tapestry. So as you read through Genesis to Revelation, as you make your way through the Genesis to Revelation of your own stories, the Genesis to Revelations of your own journeys, of your own lives, your dreams, your expectations, I want you to keep these three simple things in mind. Yeah. Number one, just as God chooses to be in the human story as a whole, he chooses to be in your personal story too. He chooses to write his will daily into your life. He chooses to know you personally. He chooses to know you intimately. And he is choosing for you to know that when it comes to him. He's choosing for you to intimately know him. He's making himself available to be known. And he's asking you also to allow him to know you personally. Now, number two, God works with who we are. God works with who we are in order to recreate us into the beautiful reflection of who he wants us to be and who we were created to be. God isn't deleting us. He's just editing us. And number three, the reality that we live in means that God isn't promising no easy Genesis to Revelation journey for anyone. God has to work in the reality of this separatedness and the dysfunction that we call sin, this phenomenon that we call sin, which is a wall between us and him, not him and us and him. He has to work with this wall, and he has to work in the mess of sin and death and selfishness and all the things that we see taking place between Genesis and Revelation in the human story and in the journeys around us all the day. He has to work in the midst of that. So he promises that when the waters are high, we won't be drowned. He promises that when the fires rage, we won't be burnt. He doesn't promise that we won't go through the waters, and he doesn't promise that we won't go through the fires. He promises that we won't drown and we won't burn because he will be with us. So as you make your way through your Genesis and as you make your way through your Revelation, I want you to know and I want you to understand that God is making his way with you. He knows you. He's not divorcing himself from you. He is staying in there with you between your Genesis and between your Revelation.